Good evening. My name is Joan Colmenares. I am in English 4, section A1, and I am going to analyze and rate the text of George Floyd using the criteria of critical thinking. The article Floyd's George Floyd's family reacted to the verdict with an uncontrollable cry that sound echoes through Black America was written by Janelle Ross for the American news website Time on April 22, 2021. Okay? I will begin with a brief summary of the article mentioned before. Despite all of the efforts Derek Chauvin's team made to cast George Floyd as the guilty party were unsuccessful. Hennepin County Judge Peter Cahill declared Chauvin guilty of murdering Floyd in April of the current year. Throughout history, there has been a racist loop where black people are neglected by society, and it continues staining United States history. Janelle Ross, from her experience, wants to raise awareness in cases where black people are involved and not let them remain unheard. The main idea of the author leans on historical events related to the black community, on how abuse, segregation, and racism led police officers to carry out violent actions that turned into unpunished murders. The author continues her analysis of the impact George Floyd's death and trial had on black people and United States society. The author's purpose is to inform and persuade the reader, showing historic and repetitive facts of black community events leading up to Floyd's murder. The tone Janelle uses is disapproving in some aspects in order to set up a contrasting atmosphere, leading the reader to take a judgmental stance. Additionally, her attitude is personal, to an atmosphere of emotional expression and revelation. The author hopes to set a mood of confidentiality and sharing in the readers, helping them understand and care about the topic. The perspective of the author is to show the role Black community needs to maintain after Floyd's trial. Regarding how the author identifies the trouble, I rate the article as Mastering 5. Janelle Ross effectively identifies the issue, shown in paragraph 2, line 3. Verdict on the first of three charges leveled against former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin in the murder of George Perry Floyd Jr. She underlies aspects relevant to the topic, as in paragraph 6, line 3. This is the way people react when history, distant and recent, obliges them to warn their children about the dangers of law enforcement and common criminal alike. I consider this article as Mastering 5 due to the influence of context and assumptions the author shows in the article. Janelle Ross analyzes the issue with a clear sense of scope and context. The cultural context is evidenced in the statement. In the 1840s, a Virginia-born slave named Dred Scott tried to turn to the law for justice. Paragraph 8, line number 1. The ethical context is evidenced in paragraph 6, line 1. People do not react with uncontrollable cries nor with the sounds of street protest when they have confidence. On the other hand, the political context is evidenced in paragraph 8, line number 1. Issued a ruling that declared black people could not be citizens, as the experience in paragraph 14, line number 1. I thought of the day I turned 16, my father took the morning off. I classify the presentation by which the author develops her perspective as mastering five. She integrates objective analysis, framing original questions, reflected in paragraph 11, line 11. There were people entirely uncomfortable with what it means for us to be free. She integrates objective analysis. Janelle Ross, support from evidence as in paragraph 18, line 7, for men of color. And she includes other perspectives as the Floyd family, paragraph 19, line 3. They will return to their homes, but not to their lives as they once were. As Derek Chauvin, lawyer, in paragraph 11, line number 1, sorry. To place a litany of conflicting, complicating, and sometimes cynically racist suggestions about Floyd's cause of death. Janelle Ross analyzes data as developing four. She distinguishes causality from correlation in paragraph 10, line 3. This is the land where Dred Scott had no rights. Just 3 decades ago, it would have been unthinkable to get a criminal indictment. The author provides appropriate data, although exploration appears to have been routine in paragraph 7, line number 1, when Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence. The most important piece of information relies on the excitement Floyd's family had during the verdict given by Peter Cahill, the Hennepin County judge, to Derek Chauvin in Minnesota. He has been convicted of murder for killing George Floyd on May 25, 2020, by kneeling on his neck for more than 9 minutes. Moreover, the trial was allowed live streaming due to COVID-19 regulations. Sorry. Chauvin was the first white Minnesota police officer to be convicted of murdering a black person, and he will spend up to 40 years in prison. Also, it remarks Thomas Jefferson's vision of rights and equality, included in the Declaration of Independence, seemed to be conceptions which were not inclusive for all. Dred Scott, a black slave, took these statements into his favor, charging his enslaver for emancipation. At the moment, the US Supreme Court created a rule stating that black people had no rights, which contributed to one of the causes that led to the Civil War. These historical facts were brought up to 2021 to compare two different events involving blacks. One of those events turned out in an injustice to Dred Scott, whilst the other in 2021 resulted in a victory for Floyd, a judicial triumph in a state where seemed impossible to get. Going back to the trial, Chauvin's attorney, Eric Nelson, exposed some tedious, troublesome racist theories about Floyd's death to the jury, but none of them can obscure the truth of George Floyd's demise. He in handcuffs, pinned to the ground with Chauvin's neck with Chauvin's knee on his neck. This remarkable event provides black people an equal justice as a real fact. Following advice given by her dad, she reached the conclusion there is no life guarantee when a person of color who endured slavery and lives in racism faced a police officer, nor there is a full investigation to the full extent of the law if a black person gets involved with the police. She personally went to Minnesota to support Floyd's movement, and after Chauvin's verdict, she talked to Floyd's family. She said she would go back. Sorry, they say they would go back home differently. On the other hand, the other three officers present when Floyd died would introduce plea bargains. Janelle Rose finishes her article affirming there is still work to do and she calls to get more people involved if a similar situation comes, to be aware of police violence regarding black people and to destroy stereotypes that divide society in order for their voices to go on. Based on, based on my analysis, I conclude that the author expresses her ideas clearly and effectively. Her arguments are deeply explained with solid and original ideas. The implications I consider important are regarding all historic facts. Janelle Rose has given of black community all the inequalities and segregation. They still continue enduring despite the obstacles. They answered violence with peaceful acts and they will continue struggling for equal laws. Thank you very much.